most dangerous empath isn't the one who feels the most. It's the one who no longer seeks to be understood. What happens when an empath stops justifying themselves? When they no longer rush to clarify their tone, intentions, or boundaries? What happens when they stop absorbing the emotional energy in every room? When they recognize that not every feeling is theirs to carry? And what happens when they no longer need your approval, reassurance, or permission to trust their own perception? Something irreversible begins. Carl Jung spent decades studying a stage of psychological integration, so rare that most never reach it. He called it individuation, the process of becoming whole rather than performing a role. In the context of empaths, we can call this the Sophia stage. It is the point when empathy stops being a survival tactic and becomes sovereignty, not colder, not harsher, just grounded. Most empaths never reach this stage because it requires letting go of the version of themselves built around being needed, agreeable, and the emotional anchor. That loss feels like death before it feels like freedom. Stay with me. By the end of this video, you may realize you're either stepping into Sophia or still living in emotional survival, mistaking it for kindness. What is Sophia stage? So, what is a Sophia stage? Mythically, it is when an empath stops existing as an open nerve and begins to live as a conscious force. Sophia isn't about feeling less. It's about no longer being controlled by what you feel. Before this stage, empathy is reactive. You enter a room and immediately sense tension. Someone's mood shifts and your body reacts. You hear disappointment in a voice and take responsibility. Feelings become instructions, and every emotional signal demands action. In the Sophia stage, this changes. You still feel everything, but you observe before responding. Emotions reach your awareness without invading your identity. Before, you absorbed. Now you filter. Before, you explain yourself in detail to prevent misunderstanding. Now you speak your truth and let it stand. Before, you rush to rescue others, stabilize chaos, and carry what wasn't yours. Now you allow them to face their own lessons. Before, you sought approval as proof of safety. In Sophia, you no longer need permission to trust your perception. This is why Sophia is often misunderstood. From the outside, it may look like detachment, but it isn't indifference. It is structure. Sophia is not the loss of softness. It is softness with structure. Carl Jung described this evolution as shadow integration. The empath finally embraces parts of themselves they were taught to suppress. Anger, firmness, skepticism, even the ability to walk away. These traits were never wrong. They were unclaimed power. When the shadow is integrated, the personality no longer splits between the good self and the strong self. They become both. Jung also described the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposites without collapsing into one side. In the Sophia stage, the empath no longer has to choose between compassion and boundaries, strength and sensitivity. They embody what Jung called the union of opposites. They can care deeply without overextending. They can love without losing themselves. This is the point where empathy becomes strategy, not manipulation, not cold calculation, but conscious direction. The empath's awareness is no longer automatic generosity. It is deliberate. They choose where their energy goes, what deserves a response, and who has access to them. That intentionality, that sovereignty, is what makes a Sophia empath so rare. Most people feel, but few integrate. Sophia occurs when feeling and discernment finally align. Why most empaths never reach Sophia? Now we face a more difficult question. If the Sophia stage is so powerful, why do most empaths never reach it? The answer is uncomfortable. What blocks them isn't weakness. It's attachment. The first reason is the addiction to being needed. Many empaths don't admit this even to themselves. They see their compassion as natural, their support as instinctive, and it is. But beneath that, Jung often observes something more complex. Being needed creates identity. It creates significance. When someone depends on you emotionally, you feel anchored. When someone comes to you in crisis, you feel valuable. When someone says, "I don't know what I'd do without you," something inside stabilizes. The rescuer role becomes more than behavior. It becomes self-definition. Sophia, however, requires stepping out of that role. It means allowing others to face their own consequences. and resisting the urge to fix things. Without someone to save, the empath must confront a difficult question. Who am I if I'm not indispensable? The second reason is identity built from pain. Many empaths silently carry the story. I am the one who survived. I endured chaos, loved deeply, stayed loyal when others left, absorbed more than most to handle. Over time, that survival becomes meaning. Their depth, insight, and emotional intelligence all feel inseparable from what they endured. Their suffering shaped them. The wounds shaped them. But Jung cautioned that individuation demands separation, not only from external roles, but also from internal identities formed in response to trauma. If your identity is built around what you survived, letting go can feel like erasing your significance. And that is terrifying. The third reason is fear of emptiness. Drama, even painful drama, creates structure. It gives the mind something to orbit, a problem to solve, attention to manage, a story to replay. Without it, there is silence. Sophia is not dramatic. It is steady, and steadiness can feel flat to someone used to emotional intensity. When the chaos settles, the empath may sense a strange loss. No crisis, no fixing, no proving, no emotional turbulence. Just space. And space can feel like disappearance. If there's no one to rescue, no wound defining you, no unresolved tension pushing you forward, what organizes your life? Many empaths unconsciously return to old patterns simply to avoid facing that emptiness. The fourth reason is fear of being misunderstood. This one is subtle. Empaths often carry a deep need for their story to be acknowledged. They want certain people to recognize that they were genuine, that they tried, that they were not what they were accused of being. It isn't about ego. It's about validation reality. But Sophia requires something uncompromising. It asks you to release the need for specific people to see you correctly. Jung noted that individuation demands separation from the collective gaze. It requires trusting your own inner authority more than external agreement. You may know the truth of what happened, but can you live with others holding a different version? Letting go of that need means surrendering control over how you exist in someone else's memory. And that can feel unbearable. This is why most empaths stop short of Sophia. Reaching it requires letting go of the rescuer, the survivor, the drama, and the need to be understood. It means stepping into an identity no longer organized around reaction. So I want to ask you honestly, which one are you still holding on to? The need to be needed, the story of survival, the familiar chaos, the desire to correct the narrative? Naming it doesn't make you weak. It reveals the threshold. And Sophia only becomes possible once you see what is still shaping you. The breaking point. Every empath has a breaking point. From the outside, it rarely looks dramatic. There's no shouting, no shattered glass, no public collapse. It begins quietly. Betrayal, sometimes subtle. A lie that doesn't fully align. A shifting story. A tone that feels off. Burnout. The exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. The heaviness that lingers into the morning. Or the slow, suffocating recognition of a repeated pattern. Different faces, same dynamic. Different promises, same outcome. At first, the empath responds as they always have. They try to understand, gather context, offer grace, argue gently, hoping logic will restore balance. But one day, something shifts, almost imperceptibly. The day the empath stops arguing is the day everything changes. There's no eruption, no emotional storm, just an unsettling stillness. The conversation unfolds as it always has. Deflection, minimization, subtle blame. But this time, the empath does not react. No rush to defend themselves. No need to convince. No desperate effort to be understood. There is space. And in that space, clarity emerges. They see the pattern without flinching. They feel the truth without softening it. The emotional charge that once flooded their body is gone. It's not numbness, it's integration. Carl Jung described a stage of transformation called nigrado, the blackening, the collapse before rebirth, the moment when illusions dissolve and the false self begins to die. For the empath, nigrado is not chaos. It is the death of denial. They realize they noticed the signs all along. They were never naive. They were negotiating with their own intuition. And when that negotiation ends, something irreversible occurs. The attachment breaks, not with anger, but with understanding. The person across from them may still talk, explain, and perform, but internally, the empath has crossed a threshold. A quiet sentence forms inside. I see you, and I no longer need you. This marks the identity shift from seeking validation to trusting perception, from emotional dependence to sovereignty. The breaking point is not destruction, it is alignment. And once alignment happens, there is no returning to who they were before. Shadow integration, the true difference. The real distinction between an empath who breaks and one who awakens is shadow integration. This is when everything they were taught to suppress becomes a source of strength. For much of their lives, empaths were rewarded for being agreeable, patient, and understanding beyond reason. Yet beneath that cultivated softness were qualities deemed unacceptable. Anger, detachment, the instinct to withdraw, and the sharp clarity that sees through pretense. In the Sophia stage, these traits are no longer denied. They are integrated. First, they accept their anger, not explosive rage or cruelty, but the clean, undeniable signal that says, this crosses a line. For years, anger felt dangerous, threatening their identity as a good one, so they buried it. But buried anger doesn't disappear. It turns inward, becoming exhaustion or quiet resentment. In integration, anger becomes information. It defines boundaries, sharpens perception, and protects softness instead of destroying it. They also accept their capacity for detachment. Empaths often fear detachment, equating it with coldness. But in Sophia, detachment is not emotional absence. It is emotional sovereignty. It is the ability to care without collapsing, to witness without absorbing. They discover they can walk away. For someone whose identity was built on staying, this is radical. Leaving once felt like failure. Now it feels like alignment. They no longer negotiate with what drains them. They no longer explain why disrespect is unacceptable. They simply remove access. Strategic silence follows. Before, silence meant tension. It felt like rejection, prompting rush reassurance. Now, silence is deliberate. It gives others space to reveal themselves, prevents unnecessary escalation, and protects energy. And perhaps most unsettling of all, they embrace their intellectual superiority in recognizing emotional patterns. This is rarely spoken about. Sophia empaths see patterns quickly, clearly, and without confusion. They instinctively track inconsistencies. They detect motives beneath words. For years, they downplayed this ability to avoid seeming arrogant or suspicious. But integration demands honesty. They were never naive. They were restraining themselves. In Jungian terms, the shadow is not just darkness. It is suppressed intelligence. The part of you that saw clearly but prioritized harmony over confrontation. It is a strategic mind hidden behind a compassionate exterior. When that intelligence is reclaimed, the empath becomes precise. And this is where the path diverges, because this level of awareness can turn bitter. Many empaths who awaken to their power feel anger for how long they ignored themselves. They feel resentment toward those who benefited from their self-abandonment. The temptation to weaponize their perception is real. This is where most empaths turn bitter. But the Sophia empath chooses integration instead. Integration means power guided by ethics, clarity guided by compassion, strength without cruelty. They do not use their insight to dominate. They use it to discern. They no longer expose every flaw they see or confront every manipulation they detect. They conserve the perception for alignment, not retaliation. Shadow integration is not about becoming harder. It is about becoming whole. Softness remains, but now it stands alongside structure. Awareness remains, but now it serves wisdom. Once integration stabilizes, the empath is no longer divided between light and strength. They are both. How the Sophia empath moves differently. When an empath enters the Sophia stage, the shift is subtle. It shows in how they move, particularly in relationships. The old empath overexplained. Tension demanded clarification. Misunderstanding demanded elaboration. Discomfort prompted adjustment of tone, timing, sometimes even truth. They believed clarity prevented abandonment. They overgave time, energy, reassurance. They anticipated unspoken needs, offered solutions before they were requested. Love meant effort, and effort meant safety. They overforgave. They read the wounds behind behavior, understood childhood trauma and insecurity, and translated harm into context. Context became justification. In Sophia, that pattern dissolves. The Sophia empath speaks once. They state the truth without decoration. Boundaries are not wrapped in apology. Needs are not softened for comfort. If clarity is required, they provide it. If it is ignored, they do not repeat themselves endlessly. One statement is enough. A boundary is not negotiable. It is a definition. This works for me. This does not. If a boundary is tested, they respond calmly. If it is dismissed, they adjust their access. They leave once. There is no dramatic exit, no emotional monologue, no attempt to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding. When the pattern becomes clear, they disengage. They do not argue with manipulation. They simply withdraw access. This is the most unsettling shift for those used to their availability. In the past, manipulation triggered explanation, guilt triggered defense, accusation triggered emotional labor. Now it triggers assessment. If someone projects blame, the Sophia empath does not rush to disprove it. They evaluate. If someone withholds affection to regain control, they do not chase, they observe. If someone twists facts, they do not escalate, they disengage. This is not detachment from love. It is detachment from distortion. Sophia empaths no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. They recognize that chaos can mimic connection, raise voices, dramatic reconciliations, emotional volatility. These once felt alive. Now they feel unstable. They are drawn to steadiness, to people who can hear no without interpreting it as rejection, to partners who remain regulated without requiring emotional management. They no longer try to fix insecurity in others. They look for responsibility. In conflict, they do not collapse or attack. They remain centered. They can acknowledge fault without self-erasure, hear criticism without absorbing shame. Their presence shifts the dynamic. Healthy partners feel safe. Unhealthy partners feel exposed. Not because of accusation, but because they are truly seen. Sophia does not chase reassurance. It does not test loyalty. It does not perform vulnerability to secure attachment. It stands in quiet certainty in relationships. This makes them rare, not because they are distant, but because they are no longer available for dynamics that require them to shrink. They still love deeply. They simply love without abandoning themselves. The ethical test. There is one final test in Sophia's stage, and Jung was clear. Shadow integration without ethics does not create wisdom. It creates a darkened path. When you reclaim suppressed intelligence, anger, and perception, you gain power. You see vulnerabilities, understand motives, and recognize where someone is weak. What you do with that awareness determines who you become. An integrated Sophia empath is strategic. A bitter shadow becomes manipulative. An integrated Sophia empath is clear. A bitter shadow becomes cruel. An integrated Sophia empath is selective. A bitter shadow becomes vindictive. The difference is not perception. Both see. The difference is intention. If integration is driven by revenge, the empath becomes what once hurt them. They use insight to control, expose weaknesses to win, justify harm as justice. But if integration is guided by compassion, something higher emerges. Power without compassion corrupts. Compassion without power destroys. Sophia holds both. They do not weaponize truth to humiliate. They do not use emotional insight to dominate. They do not punish simply because they can. They choose restraint. True integration is not measured by how much power you have. It is measured by how much power you refuse to misuse. That is the ethical line. Crossing it determines whether you become sovereign or simply another version of the darkness you once survived. Conclusion. There's a phase no one prepares you for. After clarity, after boundaries, after quietly withdrawing from what no longer fits, loneliness emerges. Old relationships begin to fall away. Some end dramatically, others fade without confrontation. Conversations feel thinner. Invitations decrease. Familiar spaces no longer feel like home. It can feel like isolation, but look closer. Your social circle is not collapsing. It is reorganizing. When you stop overgiving, some connections lose their foundation. When you stop absorbing dysfunction, certain dynamics cannot survive. When you stop explaining yourself, Access shifts. This space in between can feel empty, but it is not abandonment. It is recalibration. You are not alone. You are recalibrating. Noise reduces so alignment can emerge. The crowd thins so resonance can become visible. What leaves was built on who you had to be. What arrives will align with who you are becoming. Now the real questions stand before you. Are you still protecting the version of yourself that kept you safe? Or are you ready to become the version of yourself that cannot be controlled? This is the threshold. The world does not need more kind empaths. It needs integrated ones.